This is a work of fiction. All characters, events, and military operations depicted are entirely fictional. Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. The dog woke him. Not with a bark. Echo never barked without reason. It was the click of nails on the cabin floor. The shift in weight near the door. A low sound deep in his throat that meant something outside had changed. Caleb opened his eyes. The ceiling was the same. Pine boards, water stain in the corner, shaped like a boot print. Same as yesterday. Same as every morning for 3 years. He sat up. The cold hit his lower back first. It always did. Shrapnel doesn't care about seasons. 37 degrees outside, maybe less. Late October in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, and the lake was already thinking about ice. Echo stood at the door, not pacing, standing. One ear up, one slightly cocked to the right. That ear never came all the way up anymore. Partial deafness on that side, from a training injury before Caleb had even met him. Didn't slow him down. What is it? The dog looked at him, then back at the door. Dear? Nothing. No tail movement, no relaxation. Whatever was out there, it wasn't routine. Caleb pulled on his boots without socks, grabbed the flannel off the chair, and shrugged it on over the thermal he'd slept in. He took the knife from the shelf by the bed and clipped it to his belt. Then he opened the door, and the cold came in fast and sharp, filling the cabin like water filling a hull. Echo moved. Not toward the tree line where the deer crossed at dawn. Not toward the logging road where the trucks ran. He went straight for the lake. That was different. In 3 years, Echo had never gone to the lake first thing. He went to the tree line. He went to the road. He circled the cabin perimeter the way Caleb had taught him in the first week. The lake was afternoon territory, swimming in summer, watching the water freeze in November. Not a dawn destination. Echo, heel! The dog didn't stop. He picked up speed, cutting through the frost-stiff grass, heading downslope toward the rocky shore where the birch roots tangled with the mud and the ground turned uneven. Caleb followed. His right hand found the knife handle without thinking. 18 years in the Air Force. You don't walk toward the unknown with your hands empty. The fog sat low on the water, gray on gray on gray. No horizon line, no separation between lake and sky, just a wall of nothing where the world should have been. The shore was all rock and root, the kind of terrain that grabbed at your boots if you weren't watching your feet. Caleb watched his feet. 18 years of deployments had made that automatic. Watch the ground. Watch what's on it. Watch what's under it. The ground will tell you things that the sky won't. Echo was already at the water, standing in the shallows, chest deep in water so cold it should have turned him around. But the dog was locked on something. His body rigid, nose pointed at a shape floating 6 feet offshore, bumping gently against a submerged rock. Echo, come. The dog didn't move, didn't even flick his ear. Caleb picked his way down the last of the slope. His boots found the waterline. He stopped. He knew what a body looked like in water. He'd pulled men from rivers in Helmand province, from ditches outside Mosul, from a helicopter that went into a creek bed in the Korangal Valley at 2 in the morning with no moon and no extraction window. You don't forget the shape. You don't forget the weight. You don't forget the way water holds a man like it doesn't want to give him back. He waded in. The cold hit his shins, then his knees. Didn't matter. He grabbed the jacket collar and pulled. The body came heavy, waterlogged, male, maybe 160 soaking wet, face down. Caleb dragged him onto the rocks and rolled him over. The skin was gray-white, lips blue. He pressed 2 fingers into the carotid. Nothing. Checked breathing. Nothing. Checked the eyes. Fixed, dilated. Skin temperature matched the water. This man had been dead for hours, maybe a full day, maybe longer. Caleb's hands moved on reflex, checking for injuries, checking for bleeding. 18 years of training don't switch off because the patient is past saving. You check anyway. He sat back on his heels. His hands were wet and numb, and there was nothing they could do. Echo came out of the water and stood beside the body, dripping, still focused. His nose worked the air above the dead man's chest in short, precise pulls. He sneezed once, then resumed. Easy. Echo didn't move, didn't look up. He was cataloging. The dog had his own assessment protocol, and he wasn't done with it yet. Then Caleb saw the chain. Ball chain, standard military issue, stainless steel, tarnished, regulation length. It had slipped loose from inside the shirt collar during the time in the water, and now hung across the dead man's chest. 2 metal tags, dull and scratched, and stamped in a way that made Caleb's stomach drop before his brain caught up. He reached for them. His fingers were stiff from the cold. He turned the tags over. Moran, Caleb J. The last 4 of his social security number. Blood type, O positive. Religious preference, no REL pref. His name, his number, his blood type, his tags. He read them again, held them closer. The stamping was regulation depth. The font was correct. These weren't cheap copies from a novelty shop. These were real. His hands were shaking, not from the cold. That's me. Echo stood over the body, still as stone. His one good ear tracked every sound Caleb made, while his eyes stayed fixed on the dead man's face. He let out one low breath through his nose. The name on the tags was his. He left the body on the rocks, not because he wanted to, because there was nothing else he could do with it. He couldn't call anyone, didn't have a phone. The burner in the kitchen drawer hadn't been powered on in 4 months. He didn't make calls. Nobody called him. That was the arrangement, the only arrangement that kept the walls standing. Cal Mercer didn't exist in any system that could ring. He walked back to the cabin. Echo followed 2 steps behind, soaked from the chest down and unbothered by it. The dog shook once at the door, sending a spray of lake water across the porch boards, then walked inside and stood in the middle of the room, waiting. Caleb peeled off his wet boots, set them by the stove, lit the stove with a match from the box on the shelf. The kindling caught on the second try. He fed it 2 splits of birch, closed the door, stood up. The cabin was 1 room plus a kitchen alcove, wood stove against the east wall, bed opposite, table with 2 chairs, though the second one hadn't been sat in since he'd moved in 3 years ago. Shelf near the door with 3 cans of coffee, a box of matches, and a flashlight that worked when it felt like it. 3 years. 3 years of being Cal Mercer, paying rent in cash to a landlord in Traverse City who never visited. Working the logging crew from 7 to 3, driving a truck with no registration tied to his real name, buying groceries at the Citgo on Tuesday afternoons and nodding at the woman behind the counter without ever learning her name. She called him Hun. He called her Ma'am. That was the entire relationship. Nobody from before knew Caleb Moran was alive. That was the point. He'd thought about it carefully. SERE training. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. They teach you how to disappear, how to break patterns, how to build a cover that holds. You don't use your real first name. You don't keep the same habits. You don't contact anyone from your previous life. You become someone else so completely that the person you were stops existing. Cal Mercer was that someone else. Cal Mercer had no service record, no deployment history, no dead friends, no helicopter spinning into a creek bed at 2 in the morning. Cal Mercer just cut trees and fed his dog and slept in a cabin where nobody asked him anything he couldn't answer. And now a dead man in the lake was wearing his name around his neck. Not Cal Mercer's name, Caleb Moran's. He sat at the table, put the dog tags on the wood surface. They clinked once and went still. Echo walked to the door. Not outside. He turned, lowered himself across the threshold, and lay flat, head on paws, body blocking the frame. Every night for 3 years. Same position, same commitment. Who is he? Echo's ear twitched. He didn't lift his head. Why does he have my name? Nothing. The stove ticked as the metal expanded. Outside, a branch cracked somewhere in the tree line. Echo's ear tracked it, then dismissed it. Caleb turned the tags over in his fingers. The ball chain was newer than the tags. Someone had restrung them, taken the time to thread new chain through the holes and crimp the connector shut. That wasn't random. That was maintenance. Someone had been wearing these regularly. He set them down, picked up his coffee mug. It was empty. He didn't refill it. The options ran through his head. Linear, sequential. If A, then B. If B, then C. The pipeline taught you that. Every problem is a sequence. Break the sequence into steps. Solve each step. Move to the next. Step 1. Call the police. He couldn't. The moment anyone asked for his ID, the real name would surface. And with the real name, questions. Why was Master Sergeant Caleb Moran, United States Air Force, pararescue, living under a false identity in a rented cabin in the Upper Peninsula? Why hadn't he reported to the VA in 3 years? Why had he taken a therapy dog assigned through a federal program and vanished with it across state lines? Why was there a body on his shoreline wearing his military identification? Every answer led to a room he couldn't leave. Step 2. Move the body and walk away. He could. Load it into the lake with rocks. Let winter take care of the rest. Nobody would find it until spring, if ever. By then, he could be in Idaho, Montana, Alaska. Another cabin, another name. But Marcus Cole was lying on his rocks. If the tattoo was right, if the face was right, Marcus Cole, who was supposed to be dead, was actually dead now, and Caleb would be running from that too. He was already running from enough. Step 3. Figure it out himself. He set the empty mug down, looked at the tags one more time. He hadn't heard his own name spoken out loud in 3 years. Now it was stamped on metal hanging from a dead man's neck. He went back before dawn. The fog was thicker. Temperature had dropped another 5 degrees overnight. His breath came out white and dissolved before it cleared his chin. The sky was black. No stars. Just cloud cover pressing down on the lake like a lid. Stay. Echo looked at him from beside the bed, one eye open, the amber one, the darker of the two. I mean it. Stay. The dog got up, stretched front legs, then back, yawned once, showing every tooth, then walked past Caleb and out the open door without a pause. Of course. He didn't argue. Learned that lesson in year 1. Echo obeyed commands about 60% of the time. The other 40, he made his own assessment and acted on it. Caleb had stopped fighting the 40. The dog was usually right. They reached the shore in 10 minutes. The body was where he'd left it. Nothing had touched it. Cold enough to keep scavengers away. The fog had thickened overnight, and the shoreline looked different in the dark. Caleb almost walked past the spot before Echo stopped, angled left, and led him straight to it. Good boy. Echo didn't acknowledge it. He was already standing over the body, nose down, working. Caleb crouched beside the dead man. This time he took his time. Systematic. PJ training. You don't rush an assessment. You don't skip steps because your hands are shaking. You work the problem the same way, whether the patient is a stranger in a creek bed outside Mosul or a man you used to know lying on the rocks outside your cabin. Assess before you act. Understand before you move. Male, late 30s, lean build, underfed, cheekbones too sharp, short hair growing out uneven, like he'd been cutting it himself with dull scissors. Clothes were civilian, work boots with red Michigan clay packed in the treads, flannel shirt fraying at the cuffs, canvas jacket, no brand, no tags inside. Pockets held a gas station receipt from a Shell in Marquette, dated 4 days prior, and a small brass key with no markings. He checked the hands. Rough palms. Heavy calluses at the base of the fingers and across the heel of the hand. Working man, not office, not service industry, manual labor. He checked the head and neck, bruising on the left side of the throat, 4 distinct points of pressure where fingers had dug in, thumb impression on the opposite side, no ligature marks, no rope burn. Someone had grabbed this man by the throat and held his face under water until he stopped breathing. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a drowning. He moved to the wrists, right wrist first, inner side. He stopped. A tattoo. Small, black ink, slightly faded with time and sun. A pair of wings with a star centered between them and a banner curving beneath. No words on the banner. They'd decided against words. 4 of them, sitting in a strip mall tattoo shop outside Fayetteville, North Carolina, the week after they finished the pipeline. You survive something that washes out 90% of the men who attempt it. You don't need words. PJ Wings, their version, unofficial, not in any regulation. The kind of mark that means nothing to anyone who doesn't know, and everything to anyone who does. Caleb had the same tattoo on his own right wrist. He pulled his sleeve back, looked at his, looked at the dead man's. Same artist, same night, same table at the same shop while a country station played too loud from a speaker mounted above the door. He stared at the dead man's face, past the beard that hadn't been there before, past the hollow cheeks and the years of hard living, past all of it. The jaw, the scar through the left eyebrow, week 7 of Indoc, extended surface swim. Cole had misjudged the wall turn and split the skin above his eye on the pool edge. Blood in the water. Instructor told him to get out. Cole finished the set. Got stitched after. Marcus? He said it louder than he meant to. The name echoed off the water and came back thin. No answer. Of course no answer. He sat back on the rocks. His hands hung between his knees. His breath came fast, and he made it slow down. In through the nose, out through the mouth. 4 count. The way they taught at SERE. The way you keep your head when your head wants to leave. Echo had been standing beside the body the entire time. He hadn't shifted, hadn't looked away. Now he lowered himself to the ground, lay flat beside the dead man, head on paws, close enough that his fur touched the dead man's arm. Not afraid of the body, not repelled by it, guarding it, the same way he lay beside Caleb on the bad nights when the dreaming got loud. Caleb watched the dog. Something cracked in his chest. Not anger, not grief. Something older than both. Senior Airman Marcus Cole, 22 years old the day the helicopter went down in Kunar Province. Youngest man on the 4-man PJ team. First real deployment. His mother had sent cookies to the FOB in a tin with Christmas trees on it, even though it was March. He'd shared them with everyone. Oatmeal raisin. Nobody complained about the raisins because the kid's smile made it impossible. They'd told Caleb he was killed in action. They'd held a memorial at the base chapel. Flag draped on an easel, photo in a frame. Boots on the platform, toes pointing forward, empty. The chaplain had said words. The commander had said words. Caleb had stood in the front row and heard none of it. He'd shaken hands afterward, nodded when people spoke. His body did the ceremony, while his mind stayed in the creek bed, with the sound of rotors and the smell of fuel and the silence that comes after. 6 weeks later, he was gone. "I was at your memorial, kid." Echo didn't move. The fog drifted across the water. A loon called once from somewhere far out on the lake. The sound hung in the air, and then there was nothing. Caleb put his hand on the dead man's shoulder, held it there for 3 seconds. Then he stood. Marcus Cole died 3 years ago. Caleb had been at the memorial. The cabin was too small for what was inside his head. Caleb paced. 4 steps wall to wall, table to stove, stove to bed, bed to door, turn, repeat. Echo tracked him from the threshold, head turning left, then right, then left again. Marcus was alive, had been alive, for 3 years, walking around somewhere under some name that wasn't his, while Caleb carried the weight of his death like a slab of concrete wired to his ribs. He'd replayed that mission every night for the first year. The briefing room at the FOB, the grid coordinates on the whiteboard, the intelligence officer saying the landing zone was cold, no enemy activity in 72 hours. Green light. Caleb was team lead. He'd reviewed the intel. He'd given the go. The zone was not cold. The zone was a kill box. RPG hit the tail rotor 40 seconds after insertion. The helicopter spun twice and went into the rocks. Staff Sergeant Dylan Webb, 25, wife, 8 months pregnant. KIA. Senior Airman Marcus Cole, 22, first deployment. KIA. Caleb Moran, team lead who approved the mission, survived. Except now, one of the dead men wasn't dead, and the surviving one wished he had been more times than he could count. He stopped at the table, picked up the dog tags, put them down, picked them up again. Think. He could hear his team sergeant's voice. You panic, you die. Somebody else panics, they die too. Assess, plan, execute. Panic is a luxury nobody in this room can afford. He sat, pulled the gas receipt from his pocket. Marquette. Shell station on Route 41, 4 days ago. Paid cash. No name. Marcus had been in the area. Close. Why? The tags. Caleb's records were still in the VA system. He'd never formally closed anything, never filed separation paperwork through proper channels. He'd just stopped showing up. But the data was still there. Name, service number, social security number, medical records, disability rating. All of it sitting in a federal database, accessible to anyone with the right credentials. If someone inside that system pulled his file, they'd have everything they needed. Dog tags could be restamped. Credit lines opened, benefits claims filed under his name, while the real Caleb Moran lived in a cabin and cut trees for cash. Identity theft. He'd heard about it. Veterans were easy targets. Service records held every piece of information a fraud operation needed, and half the men those records belonged to were too broken or too disconnected to notice when their names started showing up on bank statements they'd never see. But Marcus wouldn't do that. Not the kid Caleb remembered. unless Marcus didn't have a choice. Caleb stood up. The pacing wasn't working. Pacing was emotion. He needed to move with purpose. He went to the closet, pulled out the jacket, set it on the table beside the tags. Then he went through the cabin, methodical, the way you clear a structure after contact. Start at one wall, move clockwise, check everything. Shelf, coffee, matches, flashlight, nothing disturbed. Kitchen alcove, 3 cans of soup, a bag of rice, 2 boxes of oatmeal, untouched. Under the bed, duffel bag with 3 changes of clothes and $500 in 20s rubber banded together. Still there. Under the sink, first aid kit, still sealed. He checked the windows, all latched from inside. The door lock was a joke, a twist knob that a strong wind could defeat. He'd never bothered to upgrade it because he had Echo. Some security system you are. Echo lifted his head from the floor, looked at him, put his head back down. Yeah, fair point. I didn't hear anything either. He sat back at the table, laid out what he had: the dog tags, the receipt, the key. 3 items from a dead man, 3 threads. The receipt pointed to Marquette, 4 days ago. The key fit something. The tags were his. He pulled a piece of paper from the kitchen drawer, pencil stub, drew a timeline. 3 years ago. Mission. Crash. 2 KIA. Memorial. 6 weeks. Gone. Cal Mercer. Cabin. Logging. Now. Body. Tags. Stranger asking about Cal Mercer at the logging site. He stared at it. The connections were there. He just couldn't see them yet. Caleb put his hand on the dog's head, felt the skull beneath the fur, the warmth of him, the steady breathing. I don't know what to do. He'd said it, out loud, in an empty cabin, to a dog who couldn't answer. And saying it out loud made it real in a way that thinking it never had. PJs don't say that. PJs figure it out. That others may live. The motto isn't decorative, it's operational. You figure it out, or someone dies. That's the pipeline. That's the maroon beret. That's the debt you carry for the rest of your life, whether you want it or not. But the last time Caleb figured it out, 2 men died anyway. One of them was lying on the rocks outside. The other one's wife had given birth to a daughter 3 weeks after the memorial. Caleb had never met the girl. Never would. He closed his eyes. 3 breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Opened them. Echo was still there, still leaning. The dog's eyes were on his face, watching for the signs, the tremor in the hands, the distance in the gaze, the stillness that goes too still. Echo had been trained to recognize them. Therapy dog. That was his first job. That was why the VA had paired them. Caleb had kept the dog and thrown away everything else. All right. He stood up. Echo stepped back, watched. His body was low, but his ears were up. Ready. Caleb picked up the receipt, folded it, put it in his shirt pocket, picked up the brass key, other pocket, picked up the dog tags and closed his fist around them. The metal was warm now, body temperature. He couldn't save Marcus then. He could still find out who killed him. The logging crew started at 7. Caleb was there at 6:50. He drove the truck. Rusted F-150 with an oil leak and a heater that only worked on the driver's side. Echo rode shotgun, nose near the cracked window, eyes forward. The morning was still dark. Treeline a black wall against a sky that was just starting to remember it could hold color. Pete Halverson ran the crew, 60 years old, built like a fire hydrant that had been left outside for 30 years. Voice like gravel poured into a bucket, hands so thick with callus they looked carved. He didn't ask about your past. He didn't care about your story. He paid on Fridays. Cash. Mercer, East Section. Copy. Pete pulled a toothpick from his vest pocket, worked it to the corner of his mouth, looked at Caleb a beat longer than normal. Had a visitor yesterday. Caleb's grip on his thermos tightened. The metal lid bit into his palm. What kind of visitor? Some guy drove up to the office in the afternoon. Newer truck, gray Silverado. Asked about one of my guys. By name. Your name. Cal Mercer. Said he was a friend. I don't have friends, Pete. Told him roughly the same thing. Pete spit the toothpick into the dirt and pulled a new one. He was polite about it, didn't push, but he asked the questions like he already had the answers and just wanted to see if I'd match them. Caleb kept his face still, took a slow breath. What did he look like? 40s, average build, clean-shaved, one of those zip-up fleece vests over a button-down, khakis. Looked like he worked behind a desk and wanted you to know it. You tell him anything? Told him you show up and do your work, and that's all I know about you. Pete looked at him straight. The toothpick didn't move. Because that is all I know. Appreciate it. Don't need appreciation. Need you on the East Section by 7. Pete turned to go, then stopped, turned back. Mercer? Yeah. In 30 years running crews, I've had maybe half a dozen guys who don't talk about themselves. Not can't. Don't. Every single one of them had a reason. He put the toothpick back in. I don't need to know the reason. But if that reason is standing in my parking lot asking questions, I'd appreciate a heads up before it becomes my problem. It won't become your problem. Good. Pete nodded once. East Section, 7. Caleb worked until noon. Cut, hauled, stacked. The chainsaw screamed, and his arms burned, and the noise filled his skull and blanked everything else for minutes at a stretch. Then the saw would stop, and the silence would come back with the questions inside it. At 10 o'clock, he set the saw down and drank water from the thermos. Echo lay in the bed of the truck, watching the tree line. The dog hadn't relaxed since they'd left the cabin. His ears rotated, his head stayed up. He was scanning. You see something? Echo looked at him, then back at the trees. Yeah, me too. He picked the saw back up, dropped another birch, bucked it into 4-foot lengths, stacked them on the skid. His lower back screamed at the third load, the shrapnel fragments shifting against muscle like they did every time the temperature dropped. At 11, Martinez from the West Section drove by on the skidder. Mercer, you look like hell. Feel like it too. Pete says some guy was looking for you yesterday. You in trouble? No, because if you need something, I got a cousin in Escanaba who... I'm good, thanks. Martinez shrugged, drove on. Good man. Didn't push. Caleb went back to work. The birch was wet inside despite the frost outside. The saw blade threw a spray of ice and pulp that coated his forearms. He didn't wear gloves. Hadn't worn gloves since the pipeline. You need to feel what you're holding. You need the feedback. Gloves lie to your hands. By noon, his fingers were raw and his back was locked up from the shrapnel, and there was a cut across his left thumb from a knot that split wrong. He cleaned it with water from the thermos, applied pressure with a piece of rag from the truck. PJ reflex. Assess the wound, control the bleeding, move on. Echo watched from the truck bed. The dog had been tracking every vehicle that passed on the logging road. 2 trucks. A county highway department SUV. None of them gray. None of them Silverado. Someone knew the name Cal Mercer. Someone had driven to the logging site and asked for him. Gray Silverado. Desk job appearance. Questions designed to confirm, not discover. That was the detail that bothered him most. The man hadn't been searching, he'd been verifying. Marcus had a receipt from Marquette. The VA regional office was in Marquette. A man in a fleece vest and khakis who looked like he worked behind a desk. Connection or coincidence? In Caleb's experience, the gap between those two things was about 30 seconds. And 30 seconds was exactly how long it took to go from safe to not safe. He knew that better than most. He put the saw down at noon, loaded Echo into the truck. The dog jumped in without being asked and took his position on the passenger seat, nose to the window. Leaving early. Pete looked at him from across the landing, toothpick working, eyes steady. Everything square? Square enough. All right then. Pete didn't ask why. He never did. That was why Caleb worked for him. The cabin looked right from the outside. Door closed, windows shut. No tracks in the frost except the ones he'd left that morning. The logging road was empty in both directions. But Echo knew before Caleb turned off the engine. The dog jumped from the cab before the truck fully stopped. He hit the ground and went not to the door, but to the side window. His body locked, tail straight back, horizontal, ears forward. His nose worked the window frame in short, focused bursts. He let out a sound, not a growl, not a bark, something between, a warning that hadn't decided what it was yet. Caleb reached under the driver's seat. The tire iron was cold in his hand. He approached the front door, stood to the side, shoulder against the wall, the way they'd taught him to stack on a threshold. Opened it with his left hand. Right hand held the tire iron at hip level. He scanned the room corner to corner. Left rear, right rear, center, clear. Nothing moved. The stove was still warm from morning. The table was where he'd left it. Coffee cans on the shelf, matches, flashlight. But the air was wrong. He felt it before he could name it. The space had been occupied. The cabin held the residue of a presence that wasn't his. Something moved, put back, but not exactly right. The second chair, angled 2 degrees from where he kept it. He always tucked it flush with the table edge. Now it was off, slightly pulled out, as if someone had sat in it. One of the coffee cans, turned label out. He kept labels facing in, always had. 18 years of discipline, gear in order, labels aligned, boots under the rack, laces tucked. The small things that keep the bigger things from sliding. He moved to the closet, opened the door. His jacket, the PJ jacket, last deployment, olive drab, faded at the shoulders and elbows, unit patch still sewn on the left arm. He kept it folded at the bottom of the closet, under a wool blanket, behind his winter boots. Same position for 3 years. Buried, out of sight. It was on top of the blanket now, still folded, but the creases were wrong. Caleb had folded things the same way for 18 years. Sleeves in, thirds, squared. The military way. The way that becomes muscle memory after 10,000 repetitions. He could fold a jacket in the dark and the creases would be right. These creases weren't his. Someone had taken the jacket out, unfolded it, looked at the unit patch, read the name tape. 5 letters stitched in black thread on olive drab. Moran. Then they'd folded it back and put it where they'd found it. Almost where they'd found it. Almost the right creases. He picked up the jacket, held it to his face. Canvas and storage dust. And underneath, faint but unmistakable, aftershave. Something drugstore. Something a man who worked behind a desk would wear, without thinking about it. Gray Silverado, fleece vest, khakis, aftershave. He set the jacket on the bed, stood in the center of the room, turned a full circle. Nothing else moved, nothing missing, nothing taken. The tags were in his pocket. The receipt was in his pocket. The key was in his pocket. The 520s under the bed was untouched. Nothing stolen. Because whoever had been in here wasn't a thief. They weren't after money or supplies or anything they could sell. They'd come through the door, sat in the chair, gone through the closet, found the jacket, read the name tape, and left. They'd come looking for confirmation. And the proof was a faded olive drab jacket with Moran stitched across the chest, hidden at the bottom of a closet in a cabin at the end of a logging road that nobody used except one man and his dog. Caleb walked to the kitchen alcove, opened the drawer. The burner phone sat there, black screen, dead battery. He picked it up, held it, turned it over in his hand. He could charge it. He could call someone. But who? The only number saved in it belonged to a man he hadn't spoken to in 3 years. A man who might not even have the same number anymore. He put the phone back, closed the drawer. Not yet. He went back to the door, tested the lock. Useless. He checked the windows again. Latched, but the frames were old. A screwdriver would pop any of them. "We're doing watches tonight." Echo lifted his head from the floor. "You first, then me." The dog's tail moved once. Just once. Then he put his head back down. Caleb pulled the second chair to the wall beside the door, sat in it. First time anyone had used that chair in 3 years. He positioned it so he could see both the door and the window. The tire iron went on the floor beside his right hand. Echo lay across the threshold. Same position, same commitment. Good boy. The dog's ear twitched. Caleb leaned back. The stove crackled. The cabin settled into its nighttime sounds. Pipes cooling, wood contracting. The small noises that fill a space when everything else goes quiet. But the quiet felt different now. It wasn't empty anymore. It was occupied by a name that someone else now knew. By a dead man who should have already been dead. By questions that weren't going to wait much longer for answers. Echo growled once more. Low. Certain. Whoever had been in here hadn't been looking for money. They'd been looking for a name. And they'd found it. Before first light, Caleb moved the body. Not far. A quarter mile into the forest, uphill, away from the shore where anyone walking the waterline might find it. He wrapped Marcus in the tarp from the truck bed and pulled him on a sled made from 2 birch poles lashed with rope. The ground was frozen enough to slide. Echo walked ahead, not leading, scouting. At the base of a granite outcrop, Caleb dug into the soft earth between 2 root systems. Shallow. Just enough to keep the body covered until he figured out what came next. He marked the spot. 3 knife cuts on the nearest birch, chest height, facing north. PJ Fieldcraft. Mark your cache. Know your bearings. He stood over the mound. The forest was silent. No wind. No birds yet. I'll come back for you. Echo stood beside him. The dog carried something in his mouth. Caleb looked down. The PJ jacket. He'd left it on the cabin floor when he grabbed the tarp. Echo had picked it up and carried it the entire way. Caleb stared at the dog. The dog stared back. The jacket hung from his jaws, olive drab against the black and tan of his fur. I didn't tell you to bring that. Echo set it on the ground at Caleb's feet, sat down, waited. Caleb picked up the jacket, folded it, put it inside his coat against his chest. The unit patch pressed against his ribs. All right, let's go to town. Iron Harbor had one main street. Hardware store, gas station with 2 pumps, and a hand-lettered sign that said, Exact change appreciated. Post office the size of a garden shed. A bar called The Railhead that opened at 4 and closed when the last truck left the lot. Town hall that doubled as a community center on weekends. Population 800 and something, depending on the season and whether you counted the ice fishermen. Caleb parked the truck at the hardware store. Echo stayed in the cab. Window cracked 2 inches. The dog put his chin on the dashboard and settled. Stay. I mean it this time. Echo closed his eyes, which was not the same as agreeing, but Caleb took what he could get. Inside, Carl Engstrom was behind the counter sorting lag bolts into bins. 70 years old, retired iron miner, hands like shovels. He knew everyone in the county by their vehicle before he knew them by name. Morning, Carl. Mercer, early for you. You're usually a noon man. Need a padlock, something heavy-duty. Aisle 3, Master Lock or the Harbor Freight Specials? Master Lock. Smart man. He found the lock, brought it to the counter, paid cash, 4 singles and change. Carl counted it, nodded, put it in the register. Carl, you notice anybody new around town in the last week? Someone who doesn't fit? Carl stopped sorting, looked at him over his reading glasses. The kind of look that said he'd been asked questions like this before, and he'd outlived every person who'd asked them. That depends on what you mean by fit. Driving a gray Silverado, newer model, asking about people. That the same one Pete was talking about? Could be. Carl set down the bolt he was holding, leaned both hands on the counter. Saw it twice. First time was Monday. Parked outside the post office for about 20 minutes. Man inside was on his phone. Didn't go in. Didn't get out. Just sat there. He picked up another bolt, dropped it into its bin. Second time was yesterday. Same truck. Parked at the Citgo. He went in. Asked the girl behind the counter if she knew a Cal Mercer. What'd she tell him? Donna? She told him she doesn't know anybody by that name, which is a lie, because she sells you coffee every Tuesday. But Donna lies to strangers on principle. It's one of her better qualities. And the truck? Lady at the Citgo saw it heading east on 41 Tuesday afternoon. Came back the same evening. East on 41 goes to Marquette. Marquette, Virginia office. Appreciated, Carl. Don't thank me. I'm just a man who notices things because there's nothing else to do. He went back to his bolts, then paused. Mercer, whatever this is, that dog of yours better be part of your plan, because you're not the kind of man who should be making plans alone. Caleb walked back to the truck. Echo was exactly where he'd left him. Eyes closed, chin on the dash, ears up. He opened one eye when Caleb got in, the amber one. Yeah, you're part of the plan. He sat in the truck for a minute, engine off, thinking. The man in the Silverado had been to the post office, the Citgo, the logging site. He was mapping Cal Mercer's life, building a picture, the way an intelligence officer builds a target package before an operation. Caleb had built target packages. He knew what the process looked like from the inside. This was deliberate, systematic, patient. The work of someone who understood how to gather information without being noticed. Except Carl noticed everything, and Donna lied to strangers, and Pete didn't volunteer information about his crew. Iron Harbor was small. Small towns protect their own, even the ones they don't know very well. He started the engine. Echo opened the other eye. Marquette. The dog shifted his weight. Ready. He drove east on Route 41. The road cut through forest for 20 miles, birch and pine on both sides. The occasional logging road branching off into the dark. No other traffic. Echo rode shotgun with his nose at the cracked window, reading the air. The outskirts of Marquette appeared gradually. Strip malls, a Walmart, a McDonald's, the regional medical center. Civilization. The kind of place that felt loud even when it wasn't, because there were too many signs and too many parking lots and too many people who didn't notice each other. The VA regional office sat on a side street off Washington. Red brick, 2 stories. Federal flag out front. Parking lot half full with trucks and sedans. A cigarette can by the entrance. A bench where someone had left a newspaper. Caleb sat in the truck for 5 minutes. Engine off, hands on the wheel, knuckles white. The last time he'd been inside a VAA building was 3 years and 2 months ago. Colorado Springs, follow-up appointment for the shrapnel. He'd driven there, parked, gone inside, sat in the waiting room for 40 minutes. The fluorescent lights hummed. The chairs were bolted to the floor. A man across the room had a tremor in his left hand that he kept trying to hide by sitting on it. Caleb had stood up, walked to the desk, told the receptionist he needed to use the restroom. Then he'd walked past the restroom, past the hallway, out the side entrance, got in his truck, drove north. Didn't stop driving for 2 days. Now he was sitting outside another VAA building, in a different state, under a different name, with the same dog in the passenger seat. Stay in the truck. Echo looked at him, didn't move, didn't argue, for once. I'll be back. Caleb got out, crossed the parking lot. His boots sounded too loud on the asphalt. He pushed through the glass doors. The lobby smelled like every government building he'd ever been in. Floor wax, recycled air, the chemical signature of institutional cleaning products. A waiting area with orange plastic chairs. A reception counter with bulletproof glass and a sliding window. A woman behind it who had perfected the art of looking helpful without actually being available. Can I help you? I need some information about accessing service records. General questions. She pointed him to a pamphlet rack near the water fountain. He took 2 pamphlets he would never read. Then he stood near the counter and scanned the office behind the glass. Open floor plan, cubicles in rows, file cabinets along the back wall, government-issue desks with government-issue computers. 3 employees visible, 2 women typing, 1 man. The man sat at a desk near the records section. A placard on his desk that Caleb couldn't read from this distance. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, fleece vest over a button-down, khakis. He was looking at his computer screen. His fingers moved on the keyboard. Then he looked up. He looked at Caleb. Not a glance, not the casual sweep of eyes that happens when someone new walks into a room. This was acquisition. The man's eyes found Caleb and locked, held. 2 seconds. 3. 4. His fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. His posture shifted. Subtle. A fraction of an inch. The way a man straightens when he sees something he recognizes. Then he looked back at his screen. His fingers resumed. Caleb tucked the pamphlets under his arm, walked toward the exit. Steady pace. Not fast, not slow. Don't attract attention. Don't show urgency. Walk like a man who got what he came for. Behind him, through the building's front windows, Echo barked once from the truck. Sharp. Clear. A single declaration that cut through the lobby's quiet. The receptionist looked up. A man in the waiting area turned. Caleb didn't look back. He pushed through the doors, crossed the lot, got in the truck. Echo was standing on the seat, stiff, ears fully forward. Both of them, even the bad one. He was staring at the building entrance. What did you see? The dog's attention didn't waver. His upper lip pulled back once. Not a growl, a display, an opinion expressed in teeth. Yeah, I saw him too. He started the engine, pulled out of the lot, watched the rearview mirror for 3 miles, then 5, then 10. No gray Silverado, no followers. His grip on the steering wheel loosened, one finger at a time. The man in the fleece vest. The same description Pete had given. The same truck Carl had seen. Sitting in the VA records section. Fingers on a keyboard that accessed every veteran's file in the Upper Peninsula. He didn't just have access to the database. He was the database. Every name, every number, every photo, every address, everything a veteran ever gave to the government sat on that man's screen. And now that man had seen Caleb's face. Caleb drove back toward Iron Harbor with the dog beside him and the name of a dead man in his pocket and a feeling he hadn't had in 3 years. The feeling that someone was looking back. The cabin. Dusk. Caleb sat at the table with the padlock still in its packaging and the dog tags spread out in front of him. Echo lay on the floor between the bed and the door, not at the threshold tonight, in the middle, head up, watching the windows. Then he heard the engine. Caleb killed the lamp, moved to the window. Echo was already on his feet. A vehicle, coming up the logging road. Slow. Headlights sweeping through the trees. Caleb grabbed the tire iron, positioned himself beside the door. Echo stood behind him. No sound from either of them. The vehicle stopped, engine idling, 30 yards from the cabin. Headlights pointing at the tree line, not the building. The driver hadn't pulled into the clearing. A door opened. Closed. Footsteps on gravel. One person, moving carefully. Caleb's hand tightened on the iron. His breathing slowed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. 4 count. The same count he'd used in every hot landing zone. The same count that keeps you from doing something you can't take back. The footsteps stopped outside the door. "Whoever you are, I can hear you breathing." A voice. Male. Calm. Familiar. "Open the door, Cal. It's Nate." Caleb didn't move. Echo's ears rotated forward. The dog's body shifted. Not aggressive. Alert. Processing. "Nate Weaver is in Virginia." Nate Weaver was in Virginia. Now he's standing outside your cabin in Michigan, wondering why you haven't opened the damn door. Caleb unlocked the padlock, opened the door, kept the tire iron in his right hand. The man on the porch was 6'1", lean, dark hair cut short, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. He wore a canvas jacket and jeans and boots that had seen real mud. He looked at Caleb, then at the tire iron. "Going to hit me with that?" "Haven't decided." Fair enough. Caleb studied him. Same face, same build, same way of standing with his weight on his left foot because his right knee hadn't been right since a bad free-fall landing in 2014. "How did you find me?" Nate looked at him. The humor left his face. "Same way I found Marcus." The name hit the air and hung there. Caleb's grip on the iron tightened. Echo moved, not toward Caleb, toward Nate. The dog walked past Caleb's leg, crossed the porch, and stopped in front of Nate, sniffed his hand, his wrist, his jacket, then sat down beside him. Caleb watched it happen. Echo didn't sit with strangers. Echo didn't choose people. Echo chose Caleb, and that was the entire list. Until now. He knows you. I knew his handler before you did. Echo was assigned to Sergeant Voss at Lackland. I was in the same class. Nate looked down at the dog. Hey, buddy. Been a while. Echo's tail moved once. One sweep. Get inside. They went in. Caleb lit the lamp. Nate sat in the second chair. First time anyone had used it. Echo positioned himself between them, head turning, left, right, left, monitoring. Talk. Nate leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands together. I'm not in the Air Force anymore. I work for AFOSI now. Civilian Investigator, Office of Special Investigations. I've been running a case for 14 months. Identity theft. Someone inside the VA system has been pulling service records and using them to open credit lines, file fraudulent benefits claims, redirect disability payments. 20 veterans that we know of, maybe more. And Marcus? Marcus was one of them. Not a victim, not at first. Nate paused, chose his words. The coffee mug in his hands had stopped steaming. Marcus survived the crash, Caleb. I was at his memorial. I know. Everybody was. The chapel was standing room only. Webb's wife sat in the second row. Cole's mother flew in from Oregon. But the body count from the crash site was wrong. Fog of war, blast damage. The helicopter burned after impact. They recovered 2 sets of remains and matched them to Webb and Cole based on position in the aircraft and personal effects. And Marcus? He was thrown clear on impact. Concussion, broken arm, fractured 2 ribs. He crawled 200 meters from the crash site before passing out. Nate set his mug on the table. A local Afghan patrol found him 2 days later. He was medevaced to Bagram. But by then the paperwork was done. The memorial was scheduled. The flags were ordered. So he told them. He corrected it. No, he didn't. The cabin was quiet. The stove crackled. Echo lay between the 2 chairs, head turning from one man to the other, listening. He saw a way out, or he was too broken to go back. Maybe both. I've seen his medical records from Bagram. Severe concussion, memory gaps, night terrors. He wasn't thinking straight. Nate rubbed his face with one hand. He let the KIA stand. Checked himself out of Bagram under a false name. Found his way to a civilian flight. Came back stateside. Disappeared. For 3 years. For 3 years. Living off-grid, moving between small towns. Seasonal work. Cash. No phones. No contact. Nate looked at Caleb straight. Just like you did. Caleb said nothing. The observation sat between them. 2 men, same pipeline, same crash, same response. Run. Echo's head turned toward Caleb, held there. The dog's amber eye caught the lamplight. How does he end up dead in my lake? Marcus needed money. Off-grid life is cheap, but it's not free. He picked up construction work when he could find it, but he had no ID, no references. The jobs dried up. Someone found him, offered him a deal. Use stolen veteran identities to open credit lines, earn a percentage. Marcus was already a ghost. No digital footprint, no paper trail. He was perfect for the operation. And he said yes. He was hungry, Caleb. He was sleeping in his truck in January in Wisconsin. He said yes. Who's running it? A clerk named Kyle Renner, VA Records Section, Marquette Regional Office. He has direct access to the database. Every service record in the Upper Peninsula goes through his terminal. The man in the fleece vest, the one who'd stared at Caleb across the lobby that morning. The one Echo had growled at through the glass. I saw him today. Nate's expression changed. The investigator replaced the friend. You went to the VA office? Reconnaissance. I didn't give a name. You didn't have to. Renner has access to every service photo in the regional system, every ID card photo, every enlistment photo. If he saw your face, he's already running it against the database. It's what he does. Then he knows. He will by morning. What happened to Marcus? Marcus worked the operation for about 8 months. Then he started looking at the names, really looking. Some of those veterans were dead. Some were in long-term care facilities. Some were homeless men who would never check a bank statement. Nate's voice dropped. Marcus wanted out. He told Renner he was done. Renner couldn't let that happen because Marcus knew everything. Names, amounts, methods, the whole architecture. So Renner killed him. We believe so. We can't prove it yet. There's no physical evidence linking Renner to the lake. But Marcus was building a case. He had a laptop, transaction logs, scanned documents, screenshots of the VA internal system. He hid it somewhere before he died. Caleb reached into his pocket, pulled out the brass key, set it on the table next to the dog tags. The metal clicked against metal. Found this on him. Nate picked up the key, turned it over, held it to the lamplight. Storage locker key. Possibly a P.O. box. This could be the laptop. Then Nate said the thing that broke everything open. There's something else. The intel from the mission. The grid coordinates that were wrong. Caleb's body went still. His hands stopped moving. His breathing changed. Echo's head snapped toward him from the floor. The dog knew the signs before Caleb did. The tremor that starts in the fingers. The jaw that locks. The eyes that go somewhere else. What about it? Nate set his mug down. He didn't look away. I pulled the original file. 14 months ago, when I started the case and found Marcus's name in the system. I went back to the mission report because I needed to understand why he ran. The grid reference for the insertion point was wrong by 2 digits, transposed. Columns 6 and 7 on the coordinate string. Somebody at battalion staff typed it in wrong. That doesn't change anything. It changes everything. Nate leaned forward. The intel officer who briefed you had the wrong numbers. The zone assessment was based on the wrong location. The area they said was cold was 2 kilometers east of where you actually landed. You reviewed what they gave you. You approved based on what they gave you, and what they gave you was garbage. Caleb didn't move, didn't blink. I've read the report, Caleb. I've read it 7 times. You followed protocol. You checked the assessment against the available data. The data was wrong. That's not a judgment failure. That's an input failure at a level above your pay grade. It wasn't your call. Caleb didn't speak. His hands were flat on the table, knuckles white against the wood grain. His jaw was locked so tight the muscles along his temples stood out. Echo stood up from between the chairs and walked to Caleb. Not fast. Deliberate. He pressed his flank against Caleb's leg. Full weight, head against his knee. Held it there. 3 years. He'd carried it for 3 years. Every night in the dark. Every morning before the coffee. The faces. Webb's young wife standing at the memorial in a dress that didn't fit anymore because the baby had started showing. Cole's mother, who'd sent oatmeal raisin cookies in a Christmas tin in March. The sound of the RPG, the way the helicopter pitched, the spin, the impact, the screaming that lasted 4 seconds and then didn't. All of it traced back to one moment, one word. Go. And the coordinates were wrong. Not his wrong. Someone else's wrong. A clerical error. 2 digits. 6 and 7 swapped on a line that nobody double-checked because the tempo was high and the war was long and everyone was tired. A wrong that sat in a file for 3 years while Caleb Moran dismantled his entire life. While he drove north until the road ran out. While he stopped using his name and his rank and his training and his maroon beret and everything that had defined him for 18 years. While he became Cal Mercer. While he cut trees and lived alone and talked to no one but his dog. 3 years because of 2 transposed digits. 3 years. I know. I left everything. I know, brother. The word landed. Brother. Nate hadn't called him that before. It was a PJ word, a pipeline word, a word that meant you went through something together that nobody outside the room could understand. Echo didn't move from his leg. The dog's breathing was steady. In, out, in, out. An anchor against a current that wanted to pull Caleb into the creek bed, into the smoke, into the sound that came after the silence. Caleb closed his eyes. 3 breaths. Opened them. The cabin was still there. Nate was still there. Echo was still there. What do you need from me? I need the laptop. And I need Renner to make a mistake on the system so CID can catch him in the act. Nate looked at him straight. I need you to stop being Cal Mercer. Echo's ear twitched. His head stayed on Caleb's knee. The stove crackled. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Caleb looked at the dog tags on the table. His name. His real name. The one he'd buried 3 years ago in a cabin at the end of a road that went nowhere. Nate told him more. Caleb listened. They drank coffee that Caleb made too strong, because that was how he'd always made it, and Nate didn't complain because he'd drunk worse. Renner's profile. 8 years Air Force, Security Forces. Discharged under other than honorable conditions for selling equipment at Bagram. Lost all benefits. VA denied his claims. Hired as a civilian clerk through a veteran preference program that didn't catch the discharge type. He'd been in the Marquette office for 3 years. Same 3 years Caleb had been in the cabin. He's not stupid. No, he's angry. There's a difference. Nate set his mug down. Stupid people make random mistakes. Angry people make precise ones. Renner knows exactly what he's doing. He just thinks he's justified. 20 veterans, at least. Some of those names have been active in the fraud for over 2 years. Credit cards, auto loans, benefits checks redirected to P.O. boxes Renner controls. And nobody noticed? The victims are ghosts, like you, like Marcus. Men who fell out of the system, men who don't check their credit, men who don't answer VA calls because they don't want to be found. Nate looked at him. He targeted veterans who disappeared, because disappeared men don't file complaints. How does he find them? Through the system. He has access to every record in the regional database. When a veteran stops responding to VA correspondence for 12 consecutive months, the file gets flagged as inactive. Renner pulls the inactive files, checks the last known address. If there's no forwarding, no phone number, no emergency contact responding, that name goes on his list. Hunting ground. Exactly. He's not hacking anything. He's not breaking into servers. He's sitting at his desk with authorized access and pulling records that nobody else is looking at. The system practically hands him the names. How long before someone catches it? Normally, never. The credit lines are small enough not to trigger bank fraud alerts. The benefits redirects go to P.O. boxes that get cleared every 2 weeks. The only way to catch it is if the veteran himself checks his credit report, or if someone inside the system audits Renner's access logs. Nate paused. And nobody audits access logs for a GS7 clerk in a regional office in the Upper Peninsula. He's invisible. Was invisible. Until Marcus called a tip line and a PJ named Moran washed up on a shore with someone else's dog tags around his neck. Echo had moved from Caleb's leg to the floor between them. He lay with his head up, eyes moving between the two men. Occasionally, his ear would track a sound outside, then return. How did Marcus find out what Renner was doing? If he was just running credit cards, why did he start digging? Because one of the names was someone he knew. Nate paused, rubbed the back of his neck. A guy named Tillman, staff sergeant, Army. Served at the same FOB as Marcus during his deployment. They weren't close, but Marcus recognized the name when it came to the system. And Tillman was dead, had been dead for 2 years. Suicide. And his name was still active in the network. Credit cards, a car loan, benefits still being redirected. Nate looked at the table. Marcus saw a dead man's name being used to make money, and it was a man he'd eaten dinner with in a chow hall in Afghanistan. That's when he started building the case. That's when he stopped sleeping, started making copies, started screenshotting everything he could access. He knew Renner would find out eventually. He was racing the clock. Did Renner know? Before the end? We think Renner noticed files being accessed from an unauthorized terminal. Marcus had been using a public library computer in Houghton to download some of the records. The library logs show someone fitting his description visiting 3 times in the last month. Sloppy. desperate. There's a difference. Nate picked up his coffee. It was cold. He drank it anyway. Marcus was 25 years old, living in a storage unit, eating beef jerky for dinner, trying to bring down a federal employee with a laptop and a library card. He wasn't sloppy. He was alone. Caleb said nothing. The stove crackled. Echo's ears tracked the conversation without lifting his head. He could have called someone. He did. The AFOSI tip line. 6 weeks before he died. One voicemail, no name, just a location and a suggestion. Nate set the mug down. That voicemail is the reason I'm sitting in your cabin right now. He reached out. He reached out. One time. To a number he probably found on a government website. And then he went back to his storage unit and kept working. Caleb looked at the dog tags on the table. Marcus's name wasn't on them. Caleb's was. Marcus had been wearing another man's identity around his neck while trying to dismantle the system that had given it to him. Why my tags? Why was he wearing mine? We don't know for certain. But Marcus was one of the identities in the network. Your identity. He was the one using your name for Renner's operation. Nate paused. My guess? He kept the tags as a reminder of who he was stealing from, of who he owed. Caleb closed his fist around the tags. The metal bit into his palm. The key. Where do we start? Marquette has 2 storage facilities, one on the highway, one near the marina, and the post office has P.O. boxes. Nate pulled a folded paper from his jacket. A list. Addresses. We check them tomorrow. First light. Caleb looked at the paper, then at Nate, then at Echo. You stayin'? If you've got floor space. I've got floor space. No blankets. Wouldn't be the worst place I've slept. Don't remind me. Caleb put more wood in the stove. Nate stretched out on the floor near the wall. Caleb took the chair by the door. Echo positioned himself between them, dead center of the room, head up, ears rotating, monitoring one man, then the other, back and forth. He's not sure about you yet. Smart dog. Smarter than me. That's a low bar, Cal. The sound surprised him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed. It was small. It was brief. But it was real. Echo's tail swept the floor once. Go to sleep, buddy. The dog lay down, head on paws, eyes open. He wasn't going to sleep, not with a stranger in the room. But he'd settled, and that was enough. Caleb didn't sleep. He sat in the chair and watched the dark and listened to the cabin breathe. The laptop sat on the table, closed. 47 files, 22 veterans. 1 dead, 1 sitting in this chair. Nate slept on the floor with his jacket balled under his head. He'd fallen asleep in under 3 minutes. PJ habit. You sleep when you can, because you never know when you can't. Echo lay on the floor between them, not sleeping. Head up, ears rotating, left, right, left. His attention divided between the 2 men and the dark outside the windows. You watching me or him? Echo's ear rotated once, left, then back. Non-committal. Both. Smart. At midnight, Caleb got up, put more wood in the stove, checked the windows, checked the door, checked the padlock. The air outside was cold enough to see his breath through the gap under the door. He stood at the window for a long time. The forest was black. No moon. The trees were shapes without edges. Somewhere far off, a branch cracked under the weight of frost. Echo's ear tracked it, filed it, moved on. At 12:30, Caleb sat back down, opened the laptop, scrolled through the Names folder again. 22 files, 22 veterans. He read the names, didn't recognize any of them except his own and Marcus's. But each one was a man who had served. Each one had a service number and a deployment history and a life that had been reduced to a line item in a fraud spreadsheet. He opened one at random. Foster, James T. Army, Infantry, 2 deployments, Iraq. Disability rating, 70%. Compromised, March 2022. Credit line opened, April 2022. Benefits redirect, June 2022. Status, active. James Foster. Wherever he was, whatever he was doing, someone was spending his money and using his name, and he didn't know. Or he was dead. Or he was in a VA hospital staring at a wall. Or he was in a cabin somewhere, like Caleb, hiding from a world that had used him up and filed him away. He closed the file, closed the laptop. At 1, an owl called from the tree line. Echo's ear tracked it, dismissed it. At 1:15, Caleb looked at the maroon beret sitting on the shelf where he'd set it after Nate fell asleep. The flash caught the stove light. Wings and star. He hadn't put it on, hadn't even tried, but it was out of the closet, out of the dark. That was something. At 1:30, Caleb made coffee, drank it black at the table. The laptop's battery pack hummed on the shelf where he'd plugged it in to charge. Inside it, 47 pieces of evidence that a dead man had gathered while living under a name that wasn't his. Marcus Cole. 22 when the helicopter went down. Alive at 25. Dead at 25. Different death, different war. The kind that happens in a lake in Michigan instead of a valley in Afghanistan. The kind that happens because you tried to do the right thing and somebody decided that was inconvenient. Caleb thought about the voicemail. One call to a tip line. No name. Just a location and a suggestion. 6 weeks before he died. Marcus had reached out. Once. At the end. When everything was closing in. He'd picked up a phone and called a number and said the words that started the investigation that put Nate Weaver in this cabin 3 years later. One call. That was all it took. Caleb looked at the burner phone on the shelf. Dark screen. Dead battery. He'd had it for 3 years and never used it. Marcus had made one call and changed everything. Caleb had made 0. At 2 in the morning, a vehicle came up the logging road. Slow. Caleb killed the lamp. Nate was awake instantly, on his feet, back against the wall. Military reflex. Company. I hear it. Echo was on his feet, body low, silent. Not a sound from him. His ears tracked the engine, growing louder, then stopping. 50 yards from the cabin, engine idling, headlights pointing at the tree line. Caleb moved to the window. Nate took the opposite side. Neither of them spoke. A minute passed. 2. The engine idled. Caleb could see the outline of the vehicle through the trees. Silverado. Gray. Renner. Confirming. 5 minutes. 7. 10. The engine sat there, patient. The headlights didn't move. Whoever was inside was sitting and watching and waiting. Then the engine revved once. The truck pulled a U-turn on the narrow road. Headlights swept across the tree trunks in a slow arc. Then taillights. Then nothing. Toward Marquette. Toward his records. Toward whatever he thinks he needs to protect. He's checking, making sure I'm still here, that I haven't run. Nate moved to the table, sat in the chair. His face was half visible in the stove light coming through the grate. Have you thought about it? Running? Every minute since you got here. But you're still in the chair. I'm still in the chair. That's enough for now. Silence settled back. The stove ticked. The wind moved through the pines. Echo walked from the center of the room to the window, the one facing the logging road. He lay down there, not the door, not the threshold, the window. He was watching for the truck to come back. Morning. Gray light. Frost on the window glass. Caleb made coffee. Nate sat up from the floor and took the mug without a word. They drove to Marquette. 2 trucks, Caleb's F-150 and Nate's rental, a white Tacoma. Echo rode with Caleb. The first storage facility was on the highway. Caleb tried the brass key on every unit-sized lock in the building. Nothing fit. The manager looked at them. You got a unit number? No. Then I can't help you. The second facility was near the marina. Smaller, 20 units. Salt air and the sound of halyards clanging against masts in the harbor. A chain-link fence with a code box. Nate had the code. He'd gotten it from Marcus's phone records before the trail went cold. Unit 7. Back row. Blue roll-up door with rust along the bottom edge. Caleb held up the brass key, fitted into the padlock, turned. The lock popped open. The sound was louder than it should have been in the morning quiet. He pulled the rolling door up. The hinges screamed. Echo flinched at the sound, then leaned forward, nose working. Inside, a folding table with one leg shimmed with cardboard. A sleeping bag rolled tight in the corner, stained and thin. A camp stove with a propane canister half empty. 2 bottles of water, both open. A package of beef jerky, half eaten. 3 empty cans of Campbell's soup stacked by the wall. A toothbrush in a plastic cup. And on the table, a laptop, closed, plugged into a portable battery pack by a short white cable. The space smelled like concrete and cold, and the faint residue of a man who had been living without a shower for longer than he should have been. Marcus had been living here, working here, hiding here. The sleeping bag was worn through at the elbows. The toothbrush was frayed. This wasn't a temporary stop. This was a home. The only home a dead man could afford. Caleb stood in the doorway. He'd lived in worse. FOB tents in Helmand that were 120 degrees inside by noon. A bunker in the Korengal that flooded every time it rained. But those had been temporary. Those had been duty. This was a 25-year-old kid sleeping on concrete in Michigan because the world had run out of places that would have him. How long? Based on the rental records, 4 months. He paid cash, used a name that doesn't exist. 4 months in a storage unit. He'd been in worse before that. A truck. Before that, a shelter in Green Bay that asked too many questions. Caleb stepped inside. Echo followed. The dog circled the small space, sniffed the sleeping bag, paused there, sniffed again. His nose pushed into the fabric once, twice. Then he pulled back. His head turned to Caleb, one ear forward, one back. The look a dog gives when he recognizes something and isn't sure whether to be sad about it or not. Yeah, I know. Echo left the sleeping bag, sniffed the table legs, the wall, the camp stove. Then he sat down by the door and faced outward, watching the approach, standing guard over the space Marcus had built and the evidence Marcus had gathered, the same way he'd guarded Marcus's body at the lake. Good boy. Caleb opened the laptop. The battery showed 12%. The screen flickered and came up. No password. Marcus had either been careless or in a hurry. Probably in a hurry. The desktop was organized. 3 folders arranged in a row. Names, transactions, evidence. He opened names first. 22 entries, each one a text file containing a veteran's full identity. Name, social security number, service record summary, date of birth, last known address, and beside each name, a date. The date the identity was compromised. He scrolled, found the 4th entry. Moran, Caleb J. SSN, redacted. Branch, USA FMOS. 1T2X1, Pararescue. Rank at separation, Master Sergeant, E7. Compromised, August 2023. Credit line opened, September 2023. Benefits redirect filed, November 2023. Status, active, anxious. Someone had been using his name for over a year, filing claims, opening accounts, living off his service record while he cut trees and slept in a cabin and didn't know. How much? Nate leaned over, scanned the file. Credit line was opened for $20,000. Benefits redirect averaged about $1,400 a month. Over a year, that's roughly $37,000. $37,000 under your name. Caleb closed the file, opened evidence. 47 items, scanned documents, screenshots of VA internal system pages, emails between a personal Gmail account and what appeared to be a government email address, transaction records from banks, shipping confirmations for credit cards sent to P.O. boxes in 3 different towns. Marcus built all this? He was building a case against Renner, against the network. He was going to bring it to AFOSI himself. Nate paused. He contacted our office 6 weeks before he died. Anonymous tip line. Didn't leave a name, just a voicemail that said, "Check the Marquette VA records section." That's what started my investigation. He was trying to get out and trying to burn it down on his way. Close it. Bring it. They locked the unit, took the laptop, drove back to Iron Harbor in separate trucks. Echo rode with Caleb. The dog kept his nose at the window the entire drive, scanning. The next day, Kyle Renner came to the cabin. Caleb was alone. Nate had driven to Marquette to make contact with a CID agent. Echo was inside. Caleb was splitting wood behind the cabin when he heard tires on the logging road. He set the axe down, wiped his hands, walked around front. Gray Silverado, parked 10 feet from the porch. A man in a fleece vest standing beside it with his hands in his pockets. "Help you?" Kyle Renner smiled. It was a practiced smile, the kind that goes on easy and comes off easier. "You're Cal Mercer." "That's what my landlord says." "I think your landlord is misinformed." Renner walked toward the porch, slow, hands still in his pockets. He stopped at the bottom step and looked up at Caleb. "I think your name is Caleb Moran. Master Sergeant, United States Air Force, Pararescue." He tilted his head slightly. "I think you've been living here under a false identity for about 3 years. And I think a man who used to work for me washed up in the lake outside your cabin. And I think you know that because you moved him." "That's a lot of thinking for a desk clerk." "I'm a thorough person." Echo barked from inside the cabin, one sharp sound through the closed door. Renner glanced at the door, then back at Caleb. "I've also written an email." He pulled one hand from his pocket, phone, screen on, addressed to the CID field office in Detroit. It contains your current location, your assumed identity, the fact that you've been living under a false name for 37 months, and the detail that you recovered a body from Federal Waterway and failed to report it to any law enforcement agency. He set the phone on the porch railing, screen facing Caleb. The draft email was visible. Subject line: Identity fraud. Active subject: Iron Harbor, MI. The body of the email was 3 paragraphs. Clean, professional. The work of a man who understood exactly how government paperwork destroyed people. One tap. I send this, and by tomorrow morning, a CID team is at this cabin. They'll want to know everything. Who you are, why you ran, where the body is, what you know. And you'll spend the next 2 years trying to explain that you're not the criminal. That's a hard sell for a man who's been living under a fake name. Caleb looked at the email. His name was in it. His real name. His rank. His AFSC. His last known assignment. The kind of detail that comes from a personnel file. "What do you want?" Renner's smile faded. The mask came off. What was underneath wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. The deep kind. The kind that comes from carrying something for years and knowing it will never get lighter. "I want you to do what you do best. Disappear. Get in your truck, take your dog, pick a direction. Become someone else. You've done it before." He paused. "You're good at it. Better than Marcus was. And if I don't, then I send the email, and everything you built here falls apart." He looked around the clearing, the cabin, the truck, the logging road. I know that doesn't sound like much, but I also know it's everything you have. The words landed because they were true. The cabin was nothing. The truck was nothing. The logging job paid cash and asked no questions, and that was all it was. But it was also 3 years of silence. 3 years of mornings with the dog and coffee on the porch step and the sound of the lake through the trees. 3 years of something that almost felt like living. And Renner was offering to erase it, the same way he'd erased 22 veterans from their own records. You served 8 years. Renner's jaw tightened. 8 years in security forces, Bagram, Al Udeid, stateside rotations. You wore the uniform. I wore the uniform. And when I made one mistake, the uniform took everything back. His voice changed, harder. Disability, healthcare, the GI Bill, 20 years of benefits for 8 years of service. That's what they give you, if you leave the right way. I didn't leave the right way, so I got nothing. You got a job at the VA. I got a desk and a password and a database full of men who have more than I'll ever have, because they left the right way. He picked up the phone from the railing, held it. I'm not asking you to understand. I'm asking you to leave. Echo slammed into the cabin door from the inside. The wood shuddered. Renner stepped back. The door held. Echo hit it again, harder. Your dog knows what he's doing. The third impact. The latch gave. The door swung open, and Echo came through it. 80 pounds of intention. He didn't look at Renner. He went straight to Caleb, pushed between his legs, shoved his head against Caleb's thigh, pushed hard enough to move him. The frozen circuit broke. Caleb's breath came back. His hands closed, his jaw unclenched. Echo's weight against his leg, warm, real, here. Renner watched the dog. Something moved across his face. Not fear, recognition. He knew what a bond looked like. He'd had something like it once, before the discharge, before the nothing. Think about it. He put the phone in his pocket, walked to the truck, got in, started the engine, pulled out of the clearing. The Silverado's taillights disappeared into the trees. Caleb stood on the porch. Echo leaned against his leg. The forest went quiet. The logging road settled back to dirt and frost and nothing. He looked down at the dog. Echo looked up. The amber eye, the darker one, both steady, both waiting. I know. He went inside. The cabin felt different, smaller, emptier. The second chair sat where Nate had left it. The laptop hummed on the shelf. The dog tags lay on the table beside 2 empty coffee mugs. Caleb sat in his chair. Echo lay at his feet, head on his boots. Not the paws, the boots. Full contact. He'd been given 2 choices: run again or be exposed. Both ended with Caleb Moran losing whatever he had left. And what he had left was a dog, a dead man's laptop, and a name he hadn't used in 3 years. He didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't fear keeping him awake. It was math. Caleb sat at the table with the laptop open and the dog tags beside it, and a piece of paper where he'd written 2 columns. One column said, "Run." The other said, "Stay." Under "Run," he'd written, "Safe, anonymous, alive, alone." Under "Stay," he'd written, "Exposed, vulnerable, named, not alone." The math wasn't complicated. It had never been complicated. The hard part wasn't the numbers. It was what the numbers meant. Run meant another truck, another town, another name. Cal Mercer becomes someone else. Ben something. Jake something. Whatever fit. Another logging crew or ranch or boat dock that paid cash. Another cabin with 1 chair and no phone. Another 3 years. Stay meant Caleb Moran. Out loud. On paper. In a room full of people who would ask questions he didn't want to answer. Why did you leave? Where have you been? Why didn't you report the body? Why did you take the dog? The dog. Echo lay on the floor. Not at the door tonight. Not at the window. At Caleb's feet. Head on his boots. The kind of position that meant the dog had made his decision and wasn't interested in alternatives. You're voting stay. Echo's tail moved once. You don't get a vote. His ear twitched again. Same answer. Caleb looked at the laptop screen. The evidence folder. 47 files built by a dead man in a storage unit by the marina. Marcus Cole had done what Caleb couldn't. He'd started fighting back. Not with a weapon, not with his fists. With a laptop and a password and 47 pieces of evidence that proved what a desk clerk was doing to 22 men who'd served their country. Marcus had tried to do the right thing, and it had killed him. Caleb closed the laptop, stood up, walked to the closet, reached behind his winter coat to the back of the top shelf. His hand found the maroon beret. He pulled it out, held it in both hands. The wool was soft, worn smooth from years of wear, faded in places. The flash was still pinned to the front, crest and wings, PJ insignia. He'd earned it in a pool in San Antonio, where 80% of the men who started quit before week 3. He turned it over. Inside, faded in blue ink on the sweatband, 2 words in his own handwriting. That others. He'd written them the night he graduated the pipeline, 20 years old, sitting on a bunk in a barracks room. He didn't write the full motto. Didn't need to. The 2 words were enough. A reminder of why you do it. Why you jump out of planes into places where people are dying. Why you learn to breathe underwater and set bones in the dark and run toward fire when every nerve in your body says run the other way. That others may live. Not you. Others. He'd stopped believing those words 3 years ago. Stopped believing them in a helicopter that spun into a creek bed, while the intel that sent them there turned out to be wrong by 2 digits. Stopped believing them at a memorial where empty boots stood on a platform for men who weren't there anymore. But Marcus Cole had believed them. Marcus had been building a case against a man who was stealing from veterans. Marcus had been fighting back with the only weapon he had. And Marcus was dead. And the laptop was here. And the beret was in Caleb's hands. And the dog was at his feet. I can't run again. Echo lifted his head. His eyes caught the lamplight. Amber and darker amber. Waiting. I can't. He put the beret in his jacket pocket, inside, against his chest, next to where the PJ jacket's unit patch pressed against his ribs. Not on his head. Not yet. But close enough. Then he picked up the burner phone from the drawer, turned it on. 30% battery. One number saved. He pressed call. 2 rings. It's me. Took you long enough. What's the plan? Nate told him. CID had an agent named Morales in Traverse City. She'd been briefed on the case. She was ready to move on Renner, but she needed him caught in the act. Digital evidence of him accessing and manipulating records in real time. Circumstantial evidence wouldn't hold. They needed the system logs to show Renner's credentials deleting or altering files. How do you trigger that? Someone walks into the VA office and requests their own service records, under their real name. A name that Renner has been using in his fraud network. When Renner sees that name appear on the system as an active request, he has to react. He either lets the records get pulled, which exposes the fraud lines attached to that name, or he tries to scrub the evidence before anyone sees it. And when he scrubs, CID's tech team will be monitoring the system in real time from a remote terminal. Every keystroke, every file access, every deletion. The moment Renner touches those records, they have him on a federal system tampering charge. You need me to walk in there. I need you to walk in there as Caleb Moran, your real name, spoken out loud to a federal employee, on the record. And after you talk to CID, you answer their questions, you explain everything. Cal Mercer, the cabin, the body, the laptop, the dog. I won't lie to you, living under a false identity isn't a felony in most circumstances, but it raises flags. Moving the body without reporting it is a legal issue. Taking the VA therapy dog is a program violation. There will be things you don't want to explain. But you're handing them a 14-month investigation on a plate. 22 victims, a murder suspect, digital evidence, a laptop full of proof, and a PJ who walked back into the system voluntarily to make it right. That matters, Caleb. That matters a lot. Caleb looked at Echo. The dog was watching him, still on his boots. Tomorrow morning, I'll be in the parking lot. 7 sharp. He hung up, set the phone on the table beside the dog tags and the laptop and the piece of paper with its 2 columns. Run and stay. He picked up the pencil, drew a line through run, folded the paper, put it in the stove, watched it burn. Echo watched it too. His head lifted slightly. Go to sleep, buddy. The dog put his head back on Caleb's boots, closed his eyes. For the first time in 3 nights, he looked relaxed. Morning. Caleb was up before the light, made coffee, black, the way he always made it, drank it standing at the window. Echo ate from his bowl by the stove, methodical, unhurried. Some things don't change because everything else is about to. Caleb dressed, jeans, thermal, the PJ jacket first, then the flannel over it. The unit patch sat against his left ribs, Moran across the chest, hidden under plaid. He put the dog tags in his jeans pocket, the maroon beret in his jacket pocket, the knife on his belt. He checked the cabin, stove banked, windows latched. He stood on the porch and looked at the clearing, the truck, the trees, the logging road disappearing into the dark, the lake behind the cabin, invisible but present, the place where Echo had pulled a dead man from the water 4 days ago. 4 days. It felt like a year. It felt like an hour. Let's go. Echo jumped into the truck. Caleb started the engine, backed out of the clearing. The cabin got smaller in the mirror. Then the trees closed around it. The drive to Marquette took 40 minutes. The truck burned oil, and the exhaust smelled like something that should have been fixed a year ago. The heater pushed warm air on the driver's side only. Echo rode shotgun, nose at the cracked window, the same position as every drive for 3 years. But this drive was different. Every other drive had taken Cal Mercer somewhere. This one was taking Caleb Moran. He drove with both hands on the wheel, the maroon beret in his jacket pocket, the dog tags in his jeans, the PJ jacket under his flannel, the unit patch pressing against his ribs. He could feel it with every breath. The road was empty. 40 miles of birch and pine and logging roads branching off into darkness. Echo watched the trees pass. Calm. Steady. The dog had been calm since last night, since Caleb had burned the piece of paper. As if the decision had been the only thing keeping the dog tense, and now that the decision was made, the tension was gone. Nate's white Tacoma was already in the VA parking lot when Caleb pulled in. East side, near the entrance. Nate sat in the driver's seat with a coffee cup. He nodded once through the windshield. A small motion. Economical. The kind of nod that says, "I'm here, and what are you waiting for?" in the same movement. Caleb nodded back. He turned off the engine. The truck shuddered once and went silent. The parking lot was fuller than last time. Wednesday morning, 8:30. Peak hours for the VA. Trucks and sedans. A van with a wheelchair lift. An older man in a veteran's cap walking slowly toward the entrance with a cane. Caleb watched him go inside. A man who still used the system. A man who still showed up. Who still answered when they called his name. He gripped the steering wheel. Squeezed. Let go. Squeezed again. Echo stood on the passenger seat. Both front paws on the dashboard. His body angled toward the building. Both ears forward. Even the bad one, the right one, the one that never came all the way up. It was up now, as high as it could go. "You can't come in there." Echo didn't move. "Federal building. Government rules. No dogs." The dog's eyes were fixed on the glass doors. He wasn't listening. Or he was listening and disagreeing. With Echo, those two things looked exactly the same. "I'll be back." He opened the door, got out, closed it, took 3 steps toward the building, stopped. He turned back, looked through the truck window. Echo was still standing on the seat, both paws on the dash. 60 feet of parking lot between them. The dog's eyes locked on his. Not barking, not scratching at the glass, not whining, just watching. The amber eye, the darker one, both open, both steady. The same eyes that had watched him pull a dead man from a lake. The same eyes that had watched him pace a cabin at 3 in the morning for 3 years. The same eyes that had looked through a broken door to find him frozen on a porch while a man with a phone tried to erase his life. Echo watched. That was his job. That was what he did. He watched and he waited, and when the moment came, he moved. But right now, the moment hadn't come. Right now, the moment was Caleb's. Yeah, I know. He turned, walked across the lot. His boots hit the asphalt one step at a time. Steady, even, not fast, not slow. The walk of a man approaching a threshold he'd been avoiding for 3 years. He pushed through the glass doors. The lobby. Same smell. Floor wax, recycled air, institutional cleaning products. The orange chairs. The pamphlet rack. The reception counter with the sliding glass window. A different receptionist today. Younger. Short hair. Glasses. She looked up when he approached. "Can I help you?" Caleb opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The silence stretched. 1 second. 2. His tongue sat dead against his teeth. 3 years of not saying this name. 3 years of being someone else. The muscles in his jaw had forgotten the shape of the syllables. The receptionist waited. She'd seen this before. Men who came to the counter and couldn't speak. Men who stood in government lobbies and stared at the floor. She didn't rush him. Caleb turned his head, looked through the lobby windows, the parking lot, his truck. And there, visible through the windshield, 60 feet away, Echo, standing on the seat, paws on the dash, watching through the glass. Not barking, not moving, just there. The dog who'd pulled a dead man from a lake because something in the water didn't smell right. The dog who'd carried a jacket through the forest without being told to. The dog who'd walked past his owner and sat beside a stranger on a porch because the stranger smelled like someone from the pipeline. The dog who'd broken down a cabin door with his own body because the man on the other side had stopped breathing right. 60 feet of glass and air and parking lot. And the dog's eyes were on him, holding him, the same way Echo held him on the bad nights. Not by pressing against him, just by being there, by refusing to look away. Caleb turned back to the receptionist. "My name is Caleb Moran." His voice cracked on the last syllable. He didn't stop. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't look away. "Master Sergeant, United States Air Force, Pararescue. I need to access my service records." The receptionist typed the name, letter by letter. M-O-R-A-N. The keyboard clicks sounded louder than they should have in the quiet lobby. Service number? He gave it, from memory. He hadn't said it in 3 years, but it came out clean. Some numbers you don't forget. Behind the glass partition, the office was visible. Cubicles, screens, the records section. And at his desk, Kyle Renner. Renner heard the name, or saw it appear on his screen. His hands stopped. His head turned toward the front counter, through the glass. Their eyes met. Caleb didn't blink, didn't look away. Renner's face changed. The color left first. The composure followed. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked at his computer screen, looked at Caleb, looked at his screen again. The name was in the system now. Moran, Caleb J. Active request. Flagged across the database. Every credit line. Every benefits redirect. Every fraudulent transaction attached to that name lighting up like a circuit board. Renner's fingers moved to the keyboard. Fast. He's deleting. The receptionist looked confused. The man at that desk in the records section. He's deleting federal files right now. You need to call your supervisor. She hesitated for 1 second. Then she picked up the phone. Caleb watched through the glass. Renner was typing, pulling up screens, closing windows, opening others. His fingers moved with the speed and precision of a man who had practiced this scenario, who had built escape routes into the system the same way an operator builds them into a defensive position. But escape routes only work if nobody's watching. The side door of the office opened. 2 people in suits, Agent Morales and her partner. They'd been inside the building since 7, waiting in a conference room on the 2nd floor. Nate had briefed them at 6. The tech team had been monitoring the VA system from a remote terminal since dawn. Every keystroke Renner made was being recorded. Every file he tried to delete was being captured. Every second of it. Renner saw them, stopped typing. His hands lifted from the keyboard, palms open. The woman said something Caleb couldn't hear through the glass. Renner's mouth moved. A reply. Then nothing. He put his hands flat on the desk. Then slowly, very slowly, raised them to the back of his head. Fingers interlaced. The posture of a man who'd practiced this scenario in his mind and hoped it would never come. 8 years in the Air Force. He knew the protocol. He knew what compliance looked like from the inside. The male agent came around the desk. Renner stood. The agent guided his hands behind his back. Caleb couldn't see the cuffs through the glass, but he saw Renner's shoulders adjust. A small movement. A practiced one. The way a body adapts to restraint when the body has imagined it before. Renner looked at Caleb through the partition one last time. His mouth moved. "You think this makes you a hero?" Caleb held his gaze, steady, level, the same way he'd held it across briefing room tables, across helicopter cabins, across every space where the mission was the mission, and personal feelings were weight you carried but didn't show. No. One word, enough. Renner was led through the side door. The door closed behind him. The office on the other side of the glass went still. Caleb stood at the counter. His hands were flat on the surface. He could feel the receptionist's eyes on him. He could feel the other employees watching through the partition. The building hummed. He thought about 22 veterans, names in a database, men who served, men who deployed, men who came home, broken or whole, or somewhere in between, and put their information into a system because the system said, "Trust us." And a man behind a desk had taken that trust and sold it. He thought about Marcus Cole, 22 years old, with a Christmas cookie tin in March, alive in a storage unit by the marina, building a case file by file because the system had failed, and someone had to do something. He thought about Dylan Webb, 25, wife pregnant, real KIA, no second chance, no storage unit, no comeback. He thought about himself. 3 years, a cabin, a dog, a name that wasn't his, running from a decision that turned out to not be his decision at all. 2 transposed digits, 6 and 7, a clerical error, and everything that followed. He wondered if the 22 veterans would ever know. Would the VA contact them? Would someone call a number that might not work anymore and say, "Your name was stolen, your benefits were redirected, your identity was used to buy a truck you never drove"? Would James Foster get a letter? Would the families of the dead ones get an explanation? Probably. Eventually. Government moves slow, but it moves, and now it had somewhere to go. Nate appeared at the front entrance. He'd come through the lobby doors. Quietly, the way PJs move through spaces. You don't hear them until they want you to. He looked at Caleb. The lines around his eyes were deeper than they'd been a week ago, but something in his face had shifted. The tension along his jaw had eased. The case was closing. The man they'd been looking for was in handcuffs in a conference room on the 2nd floor. Nate didn't smile. PJs don't smile at arrests. They nod. It was a nod that said, "You did the thing. Not the easy thing, the right thing." They're different, and you know the difference because you've spent your whole adult life learning it. Caleb nodded back. "It's done. The hard part hasn't started yet." "I know." They stood in the lobby for a moment. The receptionist was still on the phone. One of the other employees had sat down and was staring at her desk like it had just told her something she didn't want to hear. The building felt different, lighter. The air had changed. "I need to get my dog." "Go. Morales will set up in the parking lot. She has a mobile unit." Caleb walked out. The glass doors closed behind him. The October air hit his face. Clean. Cold. Real. He crossed the lot. 30 feet. 40. 50. The truck was there. Echo was still standing on the seat. Same position. Same pause. Same eyes. Caleb opened the door. Echo didn't jump. He didn't lunge. He stepped down from the seat with careful precision and stood on the asphalt beside Caleb's legs. Then he did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He sat. Not his usual sit. Not the casual flop he did at the cabin when he was tired. This was the sit. The formal one. The one from training. Back straight, head up, eyes forward, feet together. The kind of sit a military working dog does when the handler gives the command in German and the dog answers in posture. Caleb hadn't given any command. He crouched, one knee on the cold asphalt, put his hand on Echo's neck. The fur was warm. The muscle beneath it was steady. The heartbeat under his fingers was strong and even. Good boy. Echo's tail swept the pavement. One clean arc. Good boy. He stayed there for a moment. One knee down, hand on the dog. The parking lot moved around them. Cars pulled in and out. Doors opened and closed. An old man with a cane came out of the building. The same man who'd gone in when Caleb arrived. Veteran's cap. Older generation, judging by the pins on his cap. He stopped 10 feet away, looked at Caleb kneeling on the asphalt with his hand on a German shepherd's neck, looked at the building behind them, looked at the 2 CID vehicles parked at the far end of the lot. The old man didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He nodded once, slow, deliberate, one veteran recognizing another across a parking lot. The nod said, "I don't know what happened in there, but I know what it costs." Caleb nodded back. The old man moved on. His cane tapped the asphalt in a steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. The sound faded. Echo's ear tracked it until it was gone. Nate walked over. He stood a few feet away, hands in his jacket pockets. He didn't interrupt. He waited until Caleb stood. "CID wants to talk to you." "I figured." "Agent Morales. She's fair. She's thorough. She'll want a full statement. Everything. Cal Mercer, the cabin, Echo finding the body, the move, the laptop, the storage unit, all of it." "How much trouble am I in?" "Some. Not as much as you think." He paused. "You handed them a case they've been building for over a year. 22 victims. A murder suspect caught destroying evidence on a federal system in real time. That laptop has everything. Names, transactions, Renner's personal email linked to the VA network. You did what Marcus was trying to do. You finished it. Marcus finished it. I just walked through a door. That's more than most people do." Caleb looked at him, then at Echo. The dog was still sitting, formal, ears up, waiting for the next thing. "Where's the interview?" "Her vehicle. Black Suburban. East end of the lot. She said you can bring the dog." "Smart agent. She has 2 labs at home. She gets it." Nate reached down, touched Echo's head. Brief. The dog allowed it. His tail moved once. "I'll be right behind you." "I know." They walked, Caleb and Echo, side by side, across the lot, past the rows of trucks and sedans and the van with the wheelchair lift. The black Suburban sat at the far end. Federal plates. Tinted windows. The rear passenger door was open. Agent Morales stood beside it. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, charcoal suit jacket over a white blouse, practical shoes, a pen in her hand and a legal pad already half filled with notes. She watched Caleb approach. Her expression was professional, measured. Then she looked at Echo. Something shifted, 1 degree, the smallest change in the set of her mouth. "Master Sergeant Moran?" "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Special Agent Morales, Army CID. I need a full statement regarding your involvement with the events surrounding Kyle Renner and the death of Marcus Cole. This will take some time." "I understand." "Is the dog staying with you?" "The dog stays with me." "Understood." She stepped aside. Caleb looked at the open door, the leather back seat, the interior of a government vehicle. He'd ridden in hundreds of them. Humvees, MRAPs, Chinooks, Blackhawks. Government vehicles that took you places you didn't want to go, but went anyway, because that was the job. This one was taking him somewhere different. Not a landing zone, not an FOB, not a medevac point. This one was taking him back to his own name. Echo walked to the open door, then stopped, turned around, lowered himself to the asphalt. Flat, head-on pause, blocking the path between Caleb and the vehicle. Caleb looked at him. Really? Now? You're doing this now? Echo didn't move. His eyes were open, both of them, watching Caleb. Caleb understood. The dog wasn't blocking him from getting in. He was making him stop, making him look down, making him see what was in front of him before he stepped over it and left it behind. The same thing Echo had done at the lake, at the cabin door every night, on the porch when Renner drove away, at every threshold, every transition. Every moment when Caleb Moran could go forward or go back, Echo lay down in the middle and said, "Choose." Caleb stepped over the dog. Echo stood up, shook once. The kind of full body shake that starts at the ears and ripples down to the tail. The kind that means something has been released. Then he jumped into the Suburban and lay down on the back seat. Caleb climbed in beside him. The leather was cold. The interior smelled like government coffee and weapon cleaning solvent, and the faint residue of 1,000 official conversations. Agent Morales got in the front passenger seat. Her partner started the engine. The heater came on. Warm air moved through the cabin. Nate pulled up behind them in the white Tacoma, ready to follow. "Sir, for the record, full name?" "Caleb Moran, Master Sergeant, United States Air Force, Pararescue." He said it without cracking this time, the name that had been stamped on dog tags around a dead man's neck. The name he'd buried 3 years ago in a cabin at the end of a road that nobody used. The name a dog had been carrying in his jaws from the beginning, in the form of a jacket with 5 letters stitched across the chest. "I served 18 years, 6 deployments, Pararescue, AFSC 1 Tango 2 X-Ray 1. Agent Morales wrote it down. "We have a motto." She looked up. "That others may live." It means what it says. You put other people first. You go where they can't go, and you bring them back. I stopped doing that 3 years ago. I ran. I hid. I let other people carry what I should have been carrying. I'm done running. Morales studied him, then nodded once. Not sympathy, assessment. She'd measured him and filed the measurement away. "We have a lot to talk about, Master Sergeant." "Yes, ma'am. We do." Echo lay on the back seat beside him, head on Caleb's boot. One eye open, the amber one, the one that always opened first, the one that watched the world and decided each time whether it was safe enough to close again. The door of the Suburban was still open. Through it, the parking lot, the trees beyond, the road that led to Route 41, the road that led to Iron Harbor, the road that led to a cabin with 1 chair and a closet that was empty now. The road was still there. It would always be there. You can't stop a road from existing just because you decide not to take it. But Caleb Moran was sitting in a government vehicle with his real name on the record and his dog at his feet and a CID agent in the front seat and a maroon beret in his jacket pocket. Echo's eye closed, slowly. The lid dropped and stayed down. The dog exhaled once. Long. Steady. The exhale of a dog who had been standing watch for 3 years and had finally, for the first time, decided that someone else could take the shift. Neither of them looked back. If this story meant something to you, if you felt even a moment of what Caleb and Echo went through, drop a simple 1 in the comments. No long message needed. Just a 1, so we know you're here with us. And if you believe loyalty still matters, if you believe a dog can save a life, type dog in the comments too. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, unforgettable journeys of veterans and their dogs, hit subscribe and stay with us, because the next story might hit even deeper.